of the Democratic presidential hopefuls pushing free health care, tuition, climate change, to name a few, in their progressive agenda. This, as a new poll reveals, 77% of Democrats feel the United States would be better off if it were more socialist.
But are socialist policies the best that they have to offer to the American people? Fox News contributor and Wall Street Journal columnist Kimberly Strassel joins us now to weigh in. Hey, Kimberly, great to see you.
Hi, guys.
Morning.
Hi. So is this going to actually work? What do the polls show? Do people like this really progressive socialist agenda?
Well, I think what matters when you're looking at the candidates is that the Democratic base likes them. And that's the only issue right now because we're in a primary season. So, you look out there at the Democratic Party, in my mind, it's where the Republican Party was about 10 years ago at the height of its Tea Party absolutism. And the Democrats suffered a terrible defeat in 2016. Instead of blaming that on the candidate, Hillary Clinton, who didn't go to the right states, didn't campaign the right way, they're blaming it on the policies. And they believe that what you need is more progressive policies, ever more left, and that's what the candidates are catering to, at least at the moment.
And that explains why Harris, Booker, Gillibrand, and others, they all subscribe to the Green Deal, Medicare for all. You get a check when you're born. Is that why they're doing what they're doing? Free preschool for one of the candidates?
Yeah, and you also have to think like this group of Democratic primary contenders. They truly believe that Donald Trump doesn't have a shot at re-election in 2020. Right. So for them, this is the only game in town. Whoever wins the primary will be president of the United States. Now, I'm not saying that that's correct analysis, but that's what's in their mind. And so they're catering to the most aggressive and progressive part of their party at the moment.
Right, exactly. But you were talking about the base. The Democratic base has changed over the last 10 years.
It has. It's become younger, and it's also, as I said, had to take on these defeats that they've had, which has really radicalized them in a way. And I think the problem for these Democratic candidates with this thinking and with that base is they're not being realistic about what average Americans want. You look at Medicare for all, for instance. When you talk about, oh, well, maybe my out-of-pocket expenses will be less, when that's how they address it, then it's pretty popular. When you say you're going to have to raise taxes for it, then support for it absolutely plummets. And that's the debate that's going to end up happening in a general election.
Absolutely right. All right. Kimberly Strassel from WSJ.com. Kimberly, thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly. More Fox and Friends just moments away.
Stream the biggest speeches, see your favorite Fox Nation personalities deliver their must-see addresses, and watch a reality check CPAC special with David Webb. Today on Fox Nation. Start your free trial now.
This is a Fox News alert. Michael Cohen just arrived on Capitol Hill for his third day of testimony. Today will be behind closed doors.
That's right.
And if you have to run from the TV, run to the radio. Big show coming your way.
We'll see you back here tomorrow, everybody. So long.
Thank you, guys. Breaking news again. Two big stories at this hour. We begin with this abrupt ending to the second nuclear summit between President Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un. Here in Hanoi, Vietnam, the two sides failing to reach an agreement. Meanwhile, back at home, former Trump attorney Michael Cohen back on the Hill for a third straight day. As you saw, he arrived just moments ago. Good morning, everybody. Good evening from Vietnam. Day 3 here in Hanoi, and I'm Bill Hemmer and Sandra. Great to see you. Good morning there back at home.
And good morning from New York. Good to see you, too, Bill. I'm Sandra Smith. First to the Cohen saga. During a news conference today, President Trump zoning in on one key aspect of yesterday's explosive hearing. The moment Cohen told lawmakers he had, quote, no direct evidence of collusion. And overseas, Bill, of course, there's no shortage of action there either, as the president says he ended talks with Kim when he did not get the commitment he was looking for.
Yeah, indeed. It's been an action-packed day here, Sandra. I tell you, we were given a schedule at daybreak earlier today, so we had an idea about how the events were going to play out and how long each one would last. Around noontime, local time here in Vietnam, so this is 9 hours ago, there was a table set at the Metropole Hotel. Long list of chairs on each side. There was a camera that was trained on it locally here in Vietnam, but there was no movement inside. And the suggestion was that the meeting prior was going longer and longer, which it very well may have. But no one came into that room to fill the camera. And that's when Sarah Sanders blasted out her alert that they're heading back to the hotel. The president's going to conduct his press conference 2 hours earlier than scheduled, and there would be no further talks with the North Korean delegation. It was a stunner. It was a shock to everybody here in Vietnam. And back at the Marriott in West Hanoi, the president explained it the following way.
Thank you.
You always have to be prepared to walk. I could have signed an agreement today, and then you people would have said, oh, what a terrible deal, what a terrible thing he did. No, you have to be prepared to walk. And, you know, there was a potential we could have signed something today. I could have 100% signed something today. We actually had papers ready to be signed, but it just wasn't appropriate. I want to do it right. I'd much rather do it right than do it fast.
There were a lot of headlines from that press conference. We're going to get to all of it now. Team Fox coverage, Catherine Harrod, she's live on the Hill. Former CIA station chief Daniel Hoffman standing by here in Vietnam. But we begin in Hanoi with the chief White House correspondent, John Roberts. Hey, John, good evening to you.
Bill, good evening to you. I think you can file this one under no deal is better than a bad deal. President Trump and Kim Jong-un in their second summit here in Hanoi seem to be making really good progress in terms of the relationship. Every time we saw them together, they seemed to be getting along. They said that they were making progress, but then when it came down to the actual negotiations, they were miles apart, and that's when things began to fall apart. Kim Jong-un offered up to the president that he would close down the Yongbyon nuclear facility. That's North Korea's main nuclear facility. But in order to do it, he wanted President Trump to lift all of the sanctions against North Korea. And President Trump was just not prepared to do that for the Yongbyon plant. Listen to what the president said.
I think at a certain point, but there is a gap. We have to have sanctions, and he wants to denuke, but he wants to just do areas that are less important than the areas that we want. We know the country very well, believe it or not. We know every inch of that country, and we have to get what we have to get, because that's a big give.
Kim's demands illuminate a fundamental difference between the two sides, and that is, how do you define denuclearization? Again, the president.
I don't want to comment on that exactly, but he has a certain vision. And it's not exactly our vision, but it's a lot closer than it was a year ago. And I think, you know, eventually we'll get there. But for this particular visit, we decided that we had to walk.
The problem for President Trump, while closing down the big Yongbyon nuclear facility was a very big step on the part of Kim Jong-un, it would still leave him with all of those intercontinental ballistic missiles, some of which can hit the United States, those medium-range ballistic missiles that can hit places like Japan and certainly South Korea, and would also leave him with all of those nuclear warheads. And the president was not going to trade lifting all the sanctions and leave him with all of that nuclear material. The president did get assurances, though, from Kim Jong-un that he is not going to go back to start retesting missiles, firing missiles off, and retesting nuclear weapons. But the thing for Kim Jong-un here, Bill, is that he desperately wants out from underneath the yoke of these sanctions. So President Trump's giving him a little bit of time to think about it to see if Kim will come back and sweeten the deal. Bill?
Yeah, he actually made some news in a significant way, John. He took questions from reporters. They were subtle, they were smart. Small, I should characterize it. How did you hear it?
I mean, this was really precedent-setting. You know, Kim Jong-un has an iron fist over his media, and certainly he gets interviewed by television, but it's sort of like, dear leader, tell us the great things you're going to do for the country today. So the door was opened a crack by David Nakamura of the Washington Post, who asked a question of Kim and managed to get a little bit of an answer. And then in the next press availability, the press actually started firing questions at Kim, one about denuclearization. Listen here.
Chairman Kim, are you ready to denuclearize?
If I'm not willing to do that, I won't be here right now.
That's a good answer. Wow, that might be the best answer you've ever heard.
But then when the conversation turned to human rights abuses and whether or not that was going to come up in the conversation, President Trump ran a little interference for Kim. Listen here.
Chairman Kim, are you discussing human rights with President Trump?
인권도 논의하고 있습니까?
We're discussing everything.
So the bottom line here is they've still got a long way to go, Bill, but there was some incremental progress just from the fact there that Kim Jong-un, I believe, for the very first time, was taking questions from a free media in a foreign country. It really was quite something to see.
Yeah, it was a big, big day. John, thank you. We'll talk to you a bit later. John Roberts here in Hanoi. Back to Sandra now.
Now to more breaking news back here at home, Bill. Round 3 for Michael Cohen, the former Trump attorney, just arriving moments ago on Capitol Hill for his 3rd hearing this week. He'll be talking to the House Intelligence Committee, this time behind closed doors after a dramatic hearing yesterday. And as always, the New York Post, well, summing it up all with these words: trust me. Catherine Herridge is live from Capitol Hill, where the action continues this morning. Catherine?
Well, that's right, Sandra. Michael Cohen arrived here about 10 minutes ago at the House Intelligence Committee's secure facility. The focus today is on allegations of Russian collusion. But during his testimony yesterday, Cohen really desynced a lot of these allegations. Let's talk about the BuzzFeed story that the president directed him to lie to Congress about a 2016 Moscow real estate project. Cohen said that was not the case. He also shot down the central allegation against him in the anti-Trump dossier that was funded by the DNC and Clinton campaign and became the focus and part of the foundational piece for the FBI's counterintelligence case. Cohen testified that he had never been to Prague, Czechoslovakia. At the end of the day, Cohen said he had suspicions, but nothing concrete.
Questions have been raised about whether I know of direct evidence that Mr. Trump or his campaign colluded with Russia. I do not. And I want to be clear, but I have my suspicions.
Republicans focused during the hearing yesterday on the fact that Cohen has a track record, a bad track record with the truth, and they also focused on the person you should be seeing on the left-hand side of your screen, Lanny Davis. They allege that Lanny Davis was the fixer and the coordinator for yesterday's testimony, and he is a longtime Clinton operative who would have a lot to gain by securing that testimony from Cohen. On the hacked emails, Cohen testified that he had witnessed a phone call between then-candidate Trump, political operative Roger Stone, as well as the head of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, about the impending release of hacked DNC emails. He said that call happened in the summer of 2016.
Mr. Stone told Mr. Trump that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange, and that Mr. Assange told Mr. Stone that within a couple of days there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. Mr. Trump responded by stating to the effect, "Wouldn't that be great?"
Since that testimony, Stone has responded and denied Cohen's characterization. This is important context. In the summer of 2016, the U.S. intelligence community had not drawn a direct line between those hacked emails and Russian intelligence, Sandra. So you can't make the supposition that somehow this amounted to collusion at that time, Sandra.
And Catherine, what else did we learn yesterday?
I think the big headline is that if the president has any ongoing legal jeopardy, it's in the Southern District of New York. And there was a key piece of testimony from Michael Cohen where he told lawmakers that he had been directed by the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York not to talk about conversations that happened after an FBI raid of his apartment and his business in April of 2016.
Unfortunately, this topic is actually something that's being investigated right now by the Southern District of New York, and I've been asked by them not to discuss and not to talk about these issues.
Just want to correct that. It was actually April of 2018, so it was last year. So, Sandra, that's where we leave it. We see sort of increased or likely criminal exposure for the president in the Southern District of New York or jeopardy, but not on this issue of Russian collusion. Sandra.
A lot more on all this coming up. Catherine Herridge, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bill?
I want to get back to the conclusion of the summit here in Hanoi. With me, Daniel Hoffman, former station chief, CIA. And Daniel, good evening to you. What's the state of play at the moment, do you think, as we leave here?
Well, you know, the negotiations were helpful. The connectivity between our two sides is good. I think they helped inform us about Kim Jong-un's negotiation position. But at the heart of the matter for us right now is whether, having amassed this ICBM and nuclear capability, is Kim Jong-un really interested in trading all of that, bartering it away for food and energy and integration into the world economy? That remains an open question.
Yeah. President Trump probably has a better idea of that. And I think Mike Pompeo does, too.
He does. And maybe most importantly, President Trump has messaged Kim Jong-un and the international community that we won't accept a bad deal. we're going to press ahead with a deal that suits our national security interests.
Two more things. Mike Pompeo said we're certainly closer today than we were months ago. How close do you think they really are?
I still feel like we're pretty far away. I think there's a lot of work yet to be done. But look, Kim Jong-un has an expansive nuclear weapons and ICBM capability. That's leaving aside his chemical and biological weapons, which are also of concern to us. So, look, we're on the right path. They've frozen the testing, and that's a good thing. Now we'll see if we can move ahead. I would look at now maybe for the establishment of working groups so that we can carry on these negotiations, maybe liaison offices. We'll see how it shakes out in the coming
point here.
weeks.
There was a signing declaration that was supposed to happen, and it did not. Do you know what that declaration was expected to say?
I think I would concur with John Roberts that the discussion from the North Korea side was that they would give us Yongbyon and that we would provide sanctions relief. But specifically what was in that signing declaration, that is open to speculation at this point.
And no new summit location or date was announced today, which is a bit surprised as well, Dan.
We've got a lot of work to do before we get to the next summit, I think. But as Secretary Pompeo said, that's what we'll be turning to now.
Nice to see you.
You
Thanks
too,
for your
as always.
expertise here in Hanoi. Thank you. Daniel Hoffman here.
Thank you.
The president giving his one and only interview following the summit here in Vietnam to Sean Hannity a bit earlier today.
The president's holding out the carrot of massive economic growth. We're in Vietnam where they have made tremendous progress, and I'm sure Chairman Kim's coming back.
Well, more of Sean's one-on-one with the president a bit later this hour, so stay tuned for that. All right, next also.
Looking forward to that.
Not a bad man.
You're behaving just like everyone else who's got fired or didn't get the job they wanted.
I got exactly what I want.
Exactly what you want?
What I wanted.
President.
You're a pathological liar. You don't know truth from falsehood.
Sir,
It's
I'm
over
sorry.
now.
Are you
this is
referring
my
to me or
time.
the president?
Hey, this is my time.
I don't think my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are afraid that you're going to lie. I think they're afraid you're going to tell the truth.
Thank you, sir.
I think it's a political theater.
Sir, if you believe it's not political theater for me.
Yeah, they had a good 8 hours of testimony yesterday. Back on the Hill today, Texas Republican Will Hurd will be in the room for that hearing. He's on the House Intel Committee. And, sir, thank you for your time here. Just by way of note, you served at the CIA for 9 years. Appreciate you coming on today. How much did you watch yesterday?
I saw little bits and pieces, to be honest, and I'm on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and in about 15, 20 minutes, Mr. Cohen's going to be in front of the committee. And to be frank, I wish we were talking about India or Pakistan, two nuclear war, powers getting ready to go at each other. I don't think we're going to learn anything new from this. And let's be frank, if there were financial crimes that had happened in the past in other organizations, then guess what? Bob Mueller is going to find that out. The FBI will find that out, and we're not going to learn anything new in a closed-door session from Mr. Cohen.
Well, what do you think? What do you think, based on what Cohen is claiming? What is the legal issue, or is there one?
Well, I think the legal issue is around payments for services rendered, and what were those services? I think a check alone is not a smoking gun of something happening. However, if there was some kind of crime, a financial crime that happened, guess what? The entity that is best in the world in understanding white-collar crime and understanding financial crime is the FBI. And they will, I'm sure, have evaluated that in all of the testimony that they've taken. Again, this is not something that we're going to uncover at the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. What we should be doing is talking about India and Pakistan. In the last 20 years, they've almost had a nuclear war 3 times. One time they got really close. I know that because I was intimately involved in trying to understand that threat. We should be talking about what are the next steps with North Korea. You saw it. I think people had unreasonable expectations of what could happen in a second meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. This is high-stakes negotiation, and I think the president's right. Sometimes you got to pump the brakes and walk away. That doesn't mean conversations aren't going to continue. That doesn't mean that we're going to further, get into the details of how we get to a deal. But remember, this is something that's existed for 70 years. It's not going to get resolved in 2 meetings. And I think this told Kim Jong-un that despite domestic drama that's happening here in the United States, the president's not going to take a bad deal. And everybody was concerned before this summit that the president was going to accept a quick deal rather than a good deal. And I think he proved that was not the case by his decisions today or yesterday.
Yeah, he called it a fake hearing a bit earlier today here in Hanoi when he was asked about it. Nonetheless, despite all the protestations that you're making here today, you're going to be in a hearing room in a matter of moments here. We'll see what comes of it. Thank you, sir. Will Hurd, the Republican from Texas. Appreciate your time on the Hill. 20 past the hour, Sandra.
Thank you for covering.
Catastrophic flooding in California turns one town into an island and forces thousands of people out. A live report from an area devastated by rising waters. Plus, conservatives at CPAC warning about the growing embrace of socialist policies on the left. Will it be a rallying cry for their base ahead of 2020? RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel is on deck.
The Green New Deal drives a stake into the heart of our strong and healthy and growing economy.
Curious.
What is it, Doc?
Well, I'm not quite sure. But I'd like to prescribe my proprietary elixir.
Dr. Turner's elixir, as in you, Dr. Turner?
Yes.
And you say this stuff works?
Well, it works for me.
What if doctors were like most financial advisors?
You take care.
Creative planning is different. We never sell proprietary products. In fact, we don't even offer them. Call for a free, no-obligation consultation.
Your brain changes as you get older, but Prevagen helps your brain with an ingredient originally discovered in jellyfish. In clinical trials, Prevagen has been shown to improve short-term memory. Prevagen, healthier brain, better life.
So in this commercial, we see two travelers at a Comfort Inn with a glow around them. So people watching will be like, wow, maybe I'll glow too if I book direct at choicehotels.com.
Who glows? Just say bada book, bada boom.
Book now at choicehotels.com.
Attention military veterans. Have you or a loved one suffered hearing loss or tinnitus as a result of serving in the armed forces? If so, you may be entitled to compensation. 3M recently settled a key tam lawsuit with the U.S. government for $9.1 million for knowingly selling defective earplugs for over a decade. If you or a loved one have hearing loss or tinnitus as a result of the use of 3M's Combat Arms earplugs, call Frank Azar and Associates. Your time to file a claim may be limited. Call now at 800-394-7777.
For effective relief from arthritis pain, try Australian Dream Arthritis Pain Relief Cream. With the FDA-approved active ingredient, histamine dihydrochloride, Australian Dream is real medicine that penetrates deep into your painful muscles and joints. No odor, no burning, no numbing, non-greasy. And only Australian Dream has the empty jar guarantee. Use the whole jar. If you're not happy, return it for a full refund. You can find Australian Dream now at your favorite retailer.
President Trump sits down with Sean after his historic meeting with Kim Jong-un. He speaks out in an exclusive interview tonight on a special Hannity from Vietnam.
Hi, I'm Joan London. Today's senior living communities have never been better. With amazing amenities like movie theaters, exercise rooms and swimming pools, public cafes, bars and bistros, even pet care services. And there's never been an easier way to get great advice. A Place for Mom is a free service that pairs you with a local advisor to help you sort through your options and find the perfect place. A Place for Mom. You know your family, we know senior living. Together we'll make the right choice.
Introducing the Right Now sale from Vistaprint. With 50% off any one item, it's the perfect opportunity to try a fresh new look. Do something a little different. Build an even better brand. And with 50% off any one item, why not right now? Use promo code Why Not and own the now during the Right Now sale at Vistaprint. Now through March 3rd.
Mentioned this a moment ago. More breaking news from overseas. The Pakistani Prime Minister pledging to release a captured pilot from India. Pakistan says it shot down 2 fighter jets yesterday amid growing tensions over the disputed region of Kashmir. The Prime Minister calling the pilot's release a goodwill gesture and saying he wants to de-escalate the situation between these two countries. Both India and Pakistan are nuclear capable.
The American people are smart. They like this idea that you get to set goals in this country and go chase them down and do good things for you and your family. That's the American dream. They like that, and they're going to support President Trump.
Congressman Jim Jordan there at the annual Conservative Political Action Conference just a bit earlier this morning, highlighting the importance of American freedom amid a lurch towards socialism in the Democratic Party. Our next guest will be speaking at CPAC in an hour. Ronna McDaniel, chairwoman of the RNC. Welcome to America's Newsroom. Thank you for stopping in. Before you go give the big speech there this morning, Ronna, what are you going to tell the audience there?
Well, I think we need to share with the audience that this election is going to be a fundamental choice about what path we want our country to go on. The path of individual freedom, of liberty, of entrepreneurship, of innovation, the American dream, or a socialist path that Democrats are trying to take us down, where government takes over your health care, your education. They make all these promises. They say it's free. The problem is it's not free. It's going to cost every American. We've crunched the numbers. $93 trillion is the cost of AOC's Green New Deal. That would be $600,000 per household. It is just untenable, and it's going to be a very clear choice for voters. But we have to educate people of the pitfalls of socialism, because the Democrat Party is embracing it. It sounds great, but look underneath the hood. There's a lot of problems there.
You mentioned the Green New Deal. Here is Nancy Pelosi on that.
The other side will say it's about a job loser. It isn't. It's about jobs, 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 jobs. It's a health issue, a public health issue, clean air, clean water. It is a defense issue. We all know we have a moral responsibility to pass the planet on in the healthiest way possible to the next generation.
Ronna, with so many on the left embracing the Green New Deal, what is the message this morning at CPAC on that?
Well, we do have to educate this next generation of young voters who are on college campuses, and so many of them come to CPAC. They have to get out and talk to their peers. The Green New Deal is a path to bankruptcy for our country. You know, Margaret Thatcher famously said, socialism's great until you run out of other people's money. We look at Venezuela, where 90% of the people now are living beneath the poverty line. They can't get basic food at the grocery store. They're eating dog food and cat food. I mean, it is a huge shift in the way our country functions. It will take away the American dream, the innovation that so many of these young kids are striving for as they go to college and setting their lives up to achieve. And Democrats are not being truthful about the cost and what it will mean long term for our country. And they're selling this, oh, it's free, everything's free. It's a total bait and switch. So as the Republicans, we have an education job to do, because we want to make sure that people know what they're voting for this in November of 2020.
Very interesting. And meanwhile, the president has reacted now to the House passing this resolution to block the president's emergency declaration to fund the border wall. Here is his response to that.
I think that really it's a very dangerous thing for people to be voting against border security for anybody, including Republicans. I really think that Republicans that vote against border security and the wall, I think, you know, I've been okay at predicting things. I think they put themselves at great jeopardy.
Really, with a warning to members of his own party there, Ronna.
Well, I think it's a warning to every American. We have a huge crisis at our border, and it's disconcerting to see Republicans and Democrats not listening to the experts on the front lines. Listen, we had the Border Patrol head just testify. We have a crisis at our border. We have 2,000 people trying to cross illegally every day. We have a backlog of 800,000 cases in this country. People are looking at America as a magnet. They're coming here in droves because we have not solved our immigration issue. And it's up to these leaders to do that. Now, I would say to any Republican or Democrat, you better vote educated and make sure you're talking to the ICE agents and the CBP and the head of Border Patrol. This is a humanitarian issue, and the president is driving this issue because he's listening to the experts on the front lines.
Well, meanwhile, I know there's going to be a lot of talk about the growing and lengthy list already of Democrats running for president at CPAC this morning. Ronna, add potentially Beto O'Rourke to the list, because he said this to the Dallas Morning News: Amy and I have made a decision, his wife, about how we can best serve our country. We are excited to share it with everyone soon. So not an official announcement, but he's certainly hinting that that will be coming soon. What is the reaction to that, finally, Ronna?
Well, I think it's fascinating that Democrats are getting so excited about Beto O'Rourke, whose greatest accomplishment is that he lost. He lost a Senate race in Texas. He's done nothing in Congress. So this is going to be their champion in 2020. The field is weak. They're embracing the Green New Deal, which is a catastrophe for our country, for our economy. It will stop job growth and wage growth, which we're seeing under President Trump. So go ahead, Beto, get in, join this very dismal field. We're going to beat you in 2020.
Well, pretty soon we might have to move that picture on over to the other side of the screen there. Ronna McDaniel, I know you're speaking just short time from now. Thank you for your time ahead of that this morning.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bill?
9:30, markets are opening up as they do. The ongoing trade talks with China continue, may have taken a turn for the positive. Tomorrow is the 1st of March. That's one of the deadlines now. What the U.S. is said to be willing to do, that's got experts think an agreement might be right around the corner. Maria Bartiromo tells us what she thinks. In a moment, we'll talk to Maria live coming up here. Plus, new revelations in the death of an American detained by North Korea. The young man, Otto Warmbier, what the president said about his situation today after his meeting with Chairman Kim. All of this coming now as the president heads home on board Air Force One. He cut the summit short. We'll talk to Howie Kurtz about how the media is reacting to all of the action in a moment here from Vietnam.
Morning so far. A whirlwind day of news, though, is playing out as the North Korea summit ends without a nuclear deal. Let's bring in Maria Bartiromo, host of Sunday Morning Futures and Mornings with Maria over on FBN, fresh off of 3 hours on the Fox Business Network. Maria, what do you think? I mean, I know markets have really been watching this closely for a potential deal to get done. What is the reaction this morning?
Not a major market impact on the North Korean news. Most observers will say that this is a positive, that it shows that Donald Trump is not afraid to walk away from a deal if it's not a good deal for the United States. It would have been a lot worse had he agreed to something, whereas they would remove the sanctions and then we would only get a partial denuclearization. So the Kim Jong-un's people apparently were willing to give up some of their sites, but not all. So the president walked away. I think this is largely a positive. They're comparing this to Reagan.
Fascinating. And the president sounding pretty optimistic when it comes to getting a trade deal done with China. Here he is in his own words.
Speaking of China, we're very well on our way to doing something special, but we'll see. I mean, I am always prepared to walk. I'm never afraid to walk from a deal. And I would do that with China, too, if it didn't work out.
How are markets interpreting that?
Well, this has to get done in terms of the market expectations. I think people want to see the U.S. and China come together. The key, as we've spoken about in the past, are these big elephants in the room, like the IP theft, like the forced transfer of technology. It feels like they are going to get some kind of a commitment on the part of China in terms of stopping the theft of IP. Look, at this point, I don't know what else China has to steal because they've done so much of it over the last several decades that at this point, they are actually developing their own patents and their own innovation. So I think that will be easier than people think. The espionage, that's another problem. They're trying to make it look like it's really a separate thing in terms of Huawei and the issues around Huawei, but it's really not a separate thing. But of course, there's espionage involved. I don't know what they'll come up with in terms of using Huawei telecom equipment. The Chinese have to convince the world that you can trust their equipment. That's the bottom line. But it looks like a deal will include issues around IP theft and forced transfer of technology, as well as opening up their markets to foreigners, as well as, of course, China buying a lot of soybean and grain from the United States.
And when you look at the markets in recent weeks, recent days, it really seems like the markets are pricing in optimism that a deal will get done. Highest levels of the year for the Dow, almost 26,000 there, really bouncing back from that selling we saw at the end of 2018. There you go, less than 40 points away now from 26,000. Got to ask you about the latest economic data here at home. U.S. GDP, the reading was delayed because of the government shutdown. We got it this morning. The economy grew 2.6% in the fourth quarter. That brings the total GDP annual growth for 2018 to 2.9%. While the quarter expectation was better than expected, it didn't meet that 3% forecast that the White House put out there, Maria.
For the year, that's right. But the fourth quarter was better than expected. A couple of notes here. Number one, this is the initial reading. So we will get two more readings here. It may very well change. It probably will. But 2.6% is better than expected. And when you go through the numbers, Sandra, look at this. You've got fourth quarter business investment up 6.2%. CapEx is something that economists look at all the time because that's basically a confidence lever. It tells you our CEOs and managers of businesses confident enough to put new money to work in terms of IT, in terms of R&D. Within the business investment number, intellectual property and software up 13.1%. That is a huge number. So when you hear people say that CapEx is not strong, that's just not true, because they're not looking at things like intellectual property, software increases, innovation. You're seeing a lot of money going into those areas, and that is part of CapEx. So CapEx was a real winner here. That was better than expected. I think this number is very strong at 2.6% for the fourth quarter.
Very interesting. Those are some big numbers. In the overall government shutdown, there was concern about how that would chip away at GDP. It took off, they're estimating, about 1/10 of GDP growth for the quarter. Again, it could be revised, but nonetheless, GDP growth for all of 2018 came in at 2.9%. That was the best showing in 3 years. Yeah. Maria Bartiromo.
Imagine
Thank
that.
you.
35 days government shut down, and we're talking about 1/10% impact.
There you go. That was the number. Maria, thank you.
Thanks, Sandy.
See you again tomorrow morning.
Back here in Hanoi, Vietnam, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was in the room with the president earlier today at the press conference, talking about how they ended without an agreement. President Trump's top diplomat striking a somewhat optimistic tone. He said the following.
Unfortunately, we didn't get all the way. We didn't get to something that ultimately made sense for the United States of America. I think Chairman Kim was hopeful that we would. We asked him to do more. He was unprepared to do that. But I'm still optimistic. Everyone's very focused on how we continue to build on this. We are certainly closer today than we were 36 hours ago, and we were closer then than we were a month or two before that. I think everyone had hoped we could do just a little bit better, but the departure was with an agreement that we would continue to work on what has been an incredibly difficult problem.
President Trump saying the North wanted the U.S. to remove all sanctions, but was not willing to give up his entire nuclear arsenal in exchange for that. Sandra.
Well, the news we continue to watch this morning, and another big headline we're watching from the president's news conference. He says he does not believe Kim Jong-un was involved in the death of Otto Warmbier. The University of Virginia student died in 2017, shortly after North Korea released him from prison and returned him to the U.S. in a coma. President Trump says Kim Jong-un denied knowing about Warmbier's mistreatment.
I did speak about it, and I don't believe that he would have allowed that to happen. It just wasn't to his advantage to allow that to happen. I don't believe he knew about it.
Did he tell you that he did not, did Kim Jong-un tell you?
He felt badly about it. He tells me that he didn't know about it, and I will take him at his word.
What a moment that was, Bill, at the press conference this morning.
Yeah, it certainly was. And when you think about Otto Warmbier, when you think about the negotiations that have been going on here now, back to Singapore 8-9 months ago, and what that family is struggling with back in Cincinnati, Ohio. That's a family, Sandra, that wants peace as much as anyone right now from all of this. One other note here. Mike Pompeo said on a flight to the Philippines about 1 hour ago, he said, don't assume we did not come to agreement on a whole number of issues. That's a quote from the Secretary of State. So they moved the ball forward here in Hanoi. It's a process. And Sandra, at some point, North Korea is going to change. Maybe it's a month from now, maybe it's a year, maybe it's 5 years or even beyond. But when that day happens, they'll look back at Singapore and they'll look back at Hanoi and know that this is where that process began. Sean Hannity was the only one to have the interview today on President Trump's decision. Talked with Sean a bit earlier today about that nuclear summit. Watch here. What do you think you learned with the time that you spent him that we did not hear in the press conference?
He was saying, I want the right deal. I don't want any deal.
Does he believe the trip to Hanoi was a success in that sense?
100%.
In a moment here, more from Sean's interview and more what he heard behind the scenes today. Coming up straight ahead, Sandra.
Looking forward to that, Bill. Plus, President Trump also reacting to the latest developments in Venezuela. A live report on the ground there next.
We're sending a lot of supplies down to Venezuela. People are starving to death. And you would really think that the man in charge currently would let those supplies get through.
AT&T provides edge-to-edge intelligence, covering virtually every part of your healthcare business, so that if she has a heart problem...
Best ones for you? At NerdWallet, we sort through hundreds of credit cards to find the top cards for travel, balance transfer, and earning rewards. Stop missing out. Visit NerdWallet.com today.
Of the president's prized border wall are now piles of rubble. The concrete and steel models were demolished yesterday. They went up last year near the border, separating San Diego, California, and Tijuana, Mexico. The destruction of the prototype makes way for an extension of the existing border wall in San Diego.
They wanted to denuke certain areas, and I wanted everything. And the sanctions are there, and I didn't want to give up the sanctions unless we had a real program. Mm-hmm. And they're not ready for that, and I understand that fully. I really do. I mean, they spent a lot of time building it, and that doesn't mean the world has to be happy. But I wanted them to denuke.
That President Trump interview there with Sean Hannity bit earlier today. Sean got the only interview today here in Hanoi. I had a chance to talk to Sean just about, 5 hours ago now. And I asked him what he learned behind the scenes that we did not hear about in that press conference today. Here's Sean.
The fact that the president would say, that's not the deal I want, and say, thank you, but no thank you, and which is pretty much, I interpret what happened and his description of it. I think he was being gracious to Chairman Kim. There's definitely a friendship there. It's very Donald Trump. Look, what would be the point of allowing them, because obviously Chairman Kim wants those sanctions lifted. The president's holding out the carrot of massive economic growth. We're in Vietnam, where they have made tremendous progress, and he's saying it would be the fastest growing economy ever, and the United States would help. And I'm sure Chairman Kim's coming back. I would make that prediction with almost 99% certainty.
What do you think you learned with the time that you spent, Tim, that we did not hear in the press conference that went on for 45 minutes?
He was saying, I want the right deal, I don't want any deal. And Secretary Pompeo and the president, they both said the exact same thing. And I could have told you that going into this, that if it was not complete denuclearization that had to be verifiable with no restrictions on where they could go and what they could look at, I would tell you it would never happen under any circumstances.
The thing he said is that he was willing to blow up this enormous facility known as Yongbyon. I mean, it has hundreds of buildings. Yeah. And that apparently wasn't good enough, because I think they're enriching uranium at least at 2 other locations. So the president pushed him that far. He knows he has that on the table for the next time they get together.
100%, but when you really think about it, if you don't get complete denuclearization, what's the point? In other words, you still have the capability, and I think the president was clear saying they know where the facilities are, and if the North Korean dictator wants a better life for his people, and maybe even ultimately his own survival, then I think it is in his best interest, and his people's best interest, obviously, to go ahead, get the sanctions lifted, join the world community, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, with all the conditions that would be appropriate with that, and the world would be a safer place.
Does he believe the trip to Hanoi was a success in that sense?
100%. Oh, yeah. You know, the one thing that I have gotten to know, and I think is predictable about the president, is that he is a risk taker. There was no set, I have to have this for it to be successful. Those are the artificial, I think, expectations of, say, the media. And if you don't get a signed deal, how can you say it's a success? Go back to Ronald Reagan and Reykjavik and the issue of strategic defense. And he walked away from the table with Gorbachev. And look at how it ended.
Yeah, well, at the moment, we've got 2 down here, 1 in Singapore, 1 in Hanoi, Sandra. And the rest of Sean's interview is going to air later tonight, I should say, 9 o'clock Eastern time on Hannity. He'll also talk about Michael Cohen as well. I want to stress this point. What Secretary Pompeo emphasized with us today is that teams have gotten to know each other a lot better than before. But we were asking him to do more, and he simply did not want to do that. But again, Chairman Kim has moved. That nuclear facility is, as I mentioned there with Sean, it's big. It's massive. It was said to be on the table, but we really did not know if it was. And now we do. I think that's a major headline. The other major headline is that President Trump says Kim will not test rockets or missiles or anything more nuclear. And I think the third headline is that there is no announcement at the moment on another summit. But, that's going to progress, and we're going to see what happens in the days and weeks to come. Secretary Pompeo said, basically, both sides will go back to their corners. They'll let this soak in, and they'll think about what the next move is for each side.
Yeah, the president said heading into this, he was in no rush. And